He said, "My dad works at NASA." The whole class laughed, until this man walked in. The hallway buzzed with laughter. Sneakers squeaking against the tile floor, and the metallic clang of lockers slamming shut echoed like a chorus of indifference. Jalen kept his eyes down as he walked to class, hugging a worn copy of Astrophysics for Young Minds against his chest. His sneakers were clean but old, the soles thinning out at the heel. He moved quietly, unnoticed by most, but not by everyone. "Hey, NASA boy," someone muttered as he passed. He didn't turn around. Room 304 was filled with sunlight and chatter when he walked in. The walls were lined with colorful posters about plant biology, ancient Rome, and the solar system. Miss Pelton, their homeroom teacher, stood near the whiteboard organizing flashcards. Jalen slipped into his seat near the back, next to the window. It was his favorite spot, far enough from the center of attention, close enough to look out at the clouds and dream about rockets. The bell rang, and the class settled into silence. Miss Pelton smiled. "Good morning, everyone." "Good morning, Miss Pelton," the chorus replied. She clapped her hands lightly. "Today, we're going to do something a little different. I want each of you to share what your parents do for a living. It's part of our career week discussion." Whispers spread through the room like wildfire. Some kids looked excited, others nervous, a few rolled their eyes. "We'll go one by one," she continued. "Just a few sentences. Let's keep it kind and respectful." Jalen swallowed hard. He hated this kind of stuff. Not because he was ashamed of his parents, he wasn't, but because he already knew what was coming. The students went down the rows. "My mom's a lawyer. My dad owns a dealership. My mom's a nurse at the big hospital." On and on it went. Some kids bragged, others kept it short. Then it was Jalen's turn. He felt the weight of the room shift as soon as Miss Pelton said, "Jalen, would you like to share?" He nodded slowly, cleared his throat. My mom works at a diner part-time." And his eyes flicked to the floor. "My dad works at NASA." There was a brief, frozen moment, like the silence before a storm, and then the laughter began. It started with one kid, Bryce, sitting up front, who let out a snort. Then it spread like a virus. Even kids who didn't really know what NASA did were laughing. Some slapped their desks. Others leaned toward each other, whispering. One kid in the middle row, Jeremy, grinned and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "If your dad works at NASA, then my uncle's the President of the United States." More laughter erupted. Someone at the back faked a salute. "Commander Jalen reporting for space duty." Jalen felt his ears burn. His hands clenched around the book on his desk, fingers pressing into the paperback cover so hard it bent. He looked at Miss Pelton, hoping, just hoping, for her to say something. But she only smiled awkwardly. Okay, let's be respectful. Everyone's family is important." She moved on to the next student. And the moment passed for the class. But not for Jalen. For him, it had just begun. The rest of the day blurred. Words floated past him like white noise. Math equations, spelling lists, instructions for homework. None of it sank in. At lunch, he sat alone as usual. He unwrapped his sandwich carefully, his eyes on the cracks in the cafeteria table. From the other side of the room, he heard them whispering again. "NASA boy. Rocket man. I bet his dad cleans toilets at NASA." He bit into the sandwich without tasting it. That night, at home, the air smelled of onions and dish soap. The apartment was small but clean. Jalen's mother moved with practiced efficiency in the kitchen, her uniform still on, her hair tied back. He sat at the table, staring at his homework but not doing it. "You okay, baby?" she asked, glancing over. "Yeah," he said, then added, more quietly, "They laughed when I said Dad worked at NASA." Her hands paused over the sink. She turned off the faucet and dried them. She sat across from him, leaning in, eyes soft. "He does work at NASA," she said firmly. "I know," Jalen mumbled, "but no one believes me." "Well, that's their problem, not yours. You know the truth. Your dad's an engineer. He works hard, and he loves you. He never comes," Jalen said. "He hasn't even visited my school. Not once. He travels a lot," she said gently. "You know that. He's working on some very big projects. They're lucky to have him." Jalen nodded, but his eyes were still downcast. He didn't want to cry in front of her. Not now. Later that night, after dinner and dishes, he opened his laptop and clicked into his saved video calls. There weren't many, just a few moments captured when his dad had time to call from the lab. In one of the videos, his dad stood in front of a giant whiteboard covered in equations. He wore a NASA badge clipped to his shirt and smiled broadly as he said, "You'd love it here, kiddo. We're working on a guidance system for a Mars rover. I'll show you the blueprints next time." Jalen watched that clip 3 times before closing the laptop. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in around him. He imagined rockets lifting off, engines blazing, carving a path through the sky. In his mind, he floated beyond the ridicule, beyond the noise, into a place where people believed in him without question. But down on Earth, in that little apartment, he knew that tomorrow would come, and so would the laughter. The next few days were no better. The jokes continued. They grew sharper, more frequent. One afternoon, when Jalen opened his locker, a paper rocket fell out. It was crudely made and had the words, "NASA boy," scrawled across the side in red marker. The nose of the rocket had a smiley face drawn on it, with a speech bubble. "I clean toilets on Mars." He didn't react. He simply picked it up, crumpled it, and threw it away. No one saw the way his hands trembled. Not even the teachers seemed to notice. Or if they did, they chose not to act. Miss Pelton had started calling on him less. Other teachers treated his silence as cooperation. He was a quiet kid, easy to overlook, but in his silence, Jalen was building something, not a shield, but a foundation. Every insult, every laugh, it only deepened his resolve. He spent his weekends reading articles, books, manuals. He built small models from cardboard and wires. He watched launch videos online. He sketched rocket engines on the back of his notebooks. He believed in something bigger, something his classmates couldn't see. And every night before he fell asleep, he whispered into the dark, "Dad, I know you're out there. I just want them to see you the way I do." And in the quiet, he held on to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, his father would show them. Not just who he was, but who Jalen could become. The week rolled on like a slow, grinding wheel. Every day Jalen walked through the same halls, past the same sneers and whispers. There was no reprieve, no secret corner where he could hide. The story about NASA boy had taken on a life of its own, something exaggerated and warped by repetition. At first, it was mockery. Now it was mythology. "Hey Jalen, your dad builds spaceships with Legos? Or maybe he just sweeps the stars." He stopped reacting. That only made it worse. At recess, he sat alone under the sycamore tree near the fence. The other kids formed packs, playing basketball, kicking soccer balls, trading cards, but Jalen sat cross-legged in the dirt with a sketchpad open on his knees. His pencil traced the outline of a rocket, then the engine, then the fuel tanks. Each line was clean, purposeful, precise. "You always drawing fake stuff?" a voice called. He didn't look up. It was Kyle. His father was a cop, everyone knew. Kyle had made sure of that. He wore a blue, "Police Lives Matter" hoodie to school every other week and boasted about his dad's patrol car like it was a Ferrari. "I bet your daddy doesn't even know what a rocket looks like." Jalen stayed silent. Kyle walked off, laughing, but not before snatching a handful of dirt and tossing it toward the sketchpad. It scattered like confetti across the page. Jalen brushed it off carefully. The page was smudged, but the rocket still stood tall. At home that evening, the TV was on low, playing some rerun game show. His mom stirred a pot on the stove. The smell of garlic and tomato filled the apartment. He sat at the kitchen table again, notebook open, not writing. She looked over. "Still thinking about school?" He nodded, not lifting his head. "You want to talk about it, sweetheart?" "They don't believe me." She sighed. "People fear what they don't understand. Sometimes that means they laugh. Sometimes it means they try to make you small. But you're not small, Jalen." He blinked fast. "I told them Dad works at NASA. And they acted like I said he was an alien or something." She turned off the burner, set the spoon down, and sat beside him. "Your dad is brilliant. The kind of brilliant that makes people uncomfortable. You've got that in you too. That's why they don't get it." He stared at the steam curling up from the pot. "Why doesn't he ever come?" She rubbed his back gently. "He works in a secure research facility. Sometimes he's gone for weeks. You know that, but he loves you so much. Every time he calls, you're all he talks about. I just wish he could show them. Just once." She smiled, a little sad. Maybe one day he will. When it matters. That night, Jalen climbed into bed and pulled the covers up tight. His mom left the door ajar. Just the way he liked it. A soft sliver of hallway light fell across his bookshelf, where his favorite photo sat, him, age 6, perched on his father's shoulders, both of them grinning at the Kennedy Space Center. He closed his eyes, and the memory came alive again. The hum of fluorescent lights, the scratch of a marker against glass, his dad standing in front of a massive whiteboard, diagrams scrawled behind him like alien language, trajectories, satellite arrays, propulsion systems. On the video call, his father's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You know, buddy," his dad said, "rockets aren't about just going up. They're about escaping gravity. That takes precision, planning, and heart." Little Jalen nodded seriously. "I'm gonna help you build one someday." "You will," his father said, smiling, "and yours will fly farther." He fell asleep with that memory wrapped around him like armor. But even armor gets cracked. The next day, someone had stuck something to his locker. At first, he thought it was a school flyer. Then he saw it. A crude drawing of a cartoon rocket. Clearly copied from one of his own designs. Except this one had broken fins, fire coming out the wrong end, and a caption written in thick black Sharpie, "NASA of the Lying Boy." His breath caught. He looked around. Laughter came from behind him, Kyle and his friends high-fiving each other. Barely trying to hide it, he peeled the paper off, crushed it in his hand, and shoved it deep into his backpack. He didn't tell the teacher. What was the point? No one had done anything before. Miss Pelton hadn't even looked at him during science class that day. Not once. By lunchtime, the story had shifted again. Now kids said Jalen pretended his dad worked for NASA to impress people. One of them joked that next week, he'd say his dad was an alien. The lunchroom echoed with noise, but all of it blurred in Jalen's ears. His tray sat untouched. Across the table, another boy, Liam, was telling the group about his dad's arrest last month. He tackled the guy face down, right on the hood of the car. Got promoted to sergeant after that. The kids at the table clapped and cheered. Jalen looked away. His hands gripped his jeans. Later that evening, after homework, Jalen went to the closet where he kept the cardboard model of the ISS he and his dad had once started. It had yellowed with time, a few parts warped from humidity. He dusted it off, fixed a crooked solar panel, and set it on his desk. He didn't cry, but that night, he didn't draw rockets either. Instead, he stared at the ceiling again, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the next room. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, painting silver lines across the floor. That night, there was no video call. Only silence. The next day, someone had scrawled in red marker on his desk, "Astronaut of Lies." He didn't touch it. He just stared at it until class ended. At recess, Kyle passed by and whispered, "Heard your dad's spaceship got lost. Too bad you didn't go with him." For the first time, Jalen stood up. Kyle flinched, surprised, but Jalen didn't say anything. He simply walked past him, out toward the edge of the playground, to the spot behind the trees where the fence ended and the woods began. He sat down, away from everything. From that far back, the school looked smaller. The playground was just noise and movement. But up above, the sky stretched wide and blue, vast enough to swallow all their words. He pulled out a notebook and began to draw again. He drew a new rocket. He called it the Truth. The poster had been up on the whiteboard for over a week now. Career Day, Friday, 10 a.m. Parents share what they do. Each day, the list grew longer. Liam, police sergeant. Maya, nurse. Ellie, architect. Jordan, electrician. Jalen stared at the paper every morning, wondering whether to write anything. A blank space sat next to his name, like a dare. On Monday, he did it. He picked up the marker and wrote in clear block letters, "Mr. Carter, aerospace engineer, NASA." By lunch, the whispers had already started. "No way. Again? Is he serious?" Jalen walked with his tray past a table of girls who giggled as he passed. "I heard he's hiring an actor." One of them whispered. "That or his dad works at Napa." "Not NASA," someone added, and the table erupted in laughter. The buzz reached the teachers, too. Miss Pelton, standing in the hallway with the career day coordinator, glanced in his direction with a polite but clearly skeptical expression. He says his father is an engineer at NASA. You know, rocket stuff. The coordinator blinked. Really? Miss Pelton nodded slowly. We'll see. Thursday night arrived like a storm cloud. Jalen sat at his desk, the lamp throwing warm light on the email he had written but not yet sent. Subject: Are you coming? Hi Dad. Tomorrow is career day. Everyone's parents are coming. I told them you would. But, if you can't, I understand. Just let me know. Please. Love, Jalen. He hit send, then stared at the blinking cursor. No response came. He checked again before brushing his teeth. Still nothing. He lay in bed, listening to the slow tick of the wall clock, and tried not to imagine what the classroom would feel like if no one came for him. Again, he had dreamed once of his father walking into school in a lab coat, carrying a model rocket, stunning everyone into silence. That dream felt so distant now, like light from a faraway star, visible, but unreachable. Friday morning was unusually quiet. His mom made his lunch and added an extra juice box, just in case. When they got to school, she squeezed his shoulder before he got out of the car. He'll do everything he can to be there. Jalen nodded, but didn't speak. Inside the classroom, desks had been arranged into a semi-circle facing a makeshift presentation zone, near the whiteboard. Parents were already arriving, standing by their kids with smiles, coffee mugs, and sometimes props. The room buzzed with chatter and excitement. Liam's father was already there, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing his police uniform like a movie character. He gave high fives to students as Liam proudly gestured toward him like royalty. Ellie's mom brought in a rolled-up blueprint and a miniature model of a house. Wow, the students said. That's so cool. Jalen took his seat quietly. Hey Jalen, Kyle called from 2 rows down. Your actor late? Snickers followed. Miss Pelton glanced at the clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Parents, thank you so much for being here. Kids, let's give a big round of applause. The room erupted in clapping. One by one, parents stood and shared their careers. Some used props, others cracked jokes, a few talked too long. Every time someone finished, the kids clapped, even if they didn't fully understand the job. When it was Liam's dad's turn, he pulled out handcuffs and told a story about a wild car chase. The class roared with excitement. Jalen clapped too, even as his palms felt damp with sweat. One more parent, then 2. Still no sign of his father. Miss Pelton glanced at the list. Okay, next up we have Jalen Carter? Is your father here? A hush fell over the room. Jalen stood up slowly. The classroom door was still shut. He began, voice quiet. The silence hurt more than the laughter. And then, click, the door opened, and in walked a man in a navy blue suit, wearing a NASA lanyard around his neck. Tall, with deep brown skin, salt and pepper hair, and eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses. He held a silver case in one hand. Sorry I'm late, he said, offering a warm but professional smile. Traffic near the research facility. My name is Dr. Marcus Carter. I'm an aerospace engineer with NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. The room froze. Jalen's mouth hung open. Miss Pelton blinked rapidly. Oh, well, welcome, Dr. Carter. Please, go ahead. Dr. Carter stepped forward and set the silver case down. He opened it to reveal a small model satellite, delicate, precise, and undeniably real. This is a replica of a real satellite we launched into low Earth orbit last year. He explained. My team specializes in trajectory algorithms. Basically, we figure out how to get spacecraft from point A to point B in space, using as little fuel as possible. He glanced around the room. I'm told there are some curious minds here today. The kids leaned in. Let's talk gravity. You know how a ball falls when you drop it? Space doesn't work the same way. Out there, we play chess with gravity fields, using them to slingshot satellites across vast distances. He picked up a whiteboard marker and started drawing orbital paths, using simple curves to explain complex concepts. Suddenly, the classroom wasn't a classroom anymore. It was a control center. The kids watched in awe. Kyle stared, speechless. Jalen sat straighter, his chest rising with each breath. When the talk ended, the room exploded into applause, genuine, thunderous applause. Kids who had never spoken to Jalen before leaned in. Your dad is awesome. Can we go to space? Did you really help launch a satellite? Dr. Carter smiled and nodded. We all work in teams. No one builds space missions alone. But yes, I helped. Afterward, he stood with Jalen, hand resting on his son's shoulder. Miss Pelton approached, still looking stunned. Dr. Carter, that was incredible. Thank you so much. Jalen's dad smiled. Thank you for letting me share. I don't get many chances to talk to classrooms like this. As they walked to the car later, Jalen looked up at his father. You came. Dr. Carter nodded. Wouldn't miss it. I thought maybe you wouldn't. I told you, I may not always be there on time, but when it matters, I show up. They got in the car, and Jalen's mom smiled in the rearview mirror. At school the next Monday, Jalen walked through the hallway, and it felt different. Not quiet, not loud, but respectful. Kids nodded, some even smiled. No one said, liar. No one laughed. And taped to his locker, this time, was a drawing, a rocket, with the words, fly high. Jalen. The morning sun slanted through the wide windows of room 6B as career day entered its second hour. Every student had polished their desk nameplates. Chairs had been rearranged to make more space for parents standing in the back or sitting beside their children. There were donuts and coffee for the adults, juice boxes for the kids. The room buzzed with pride. Liam's dad had finished his story about arresting a jewel thief. Ellie's mom had pulled out floor plans of a futuristic eco-house. And even Jordan's electrician father had drawn cheers with a demo using wires and a bulb that lit up when connected. Each parent was met with claps, gasps, and admiration. And with each presentation, the pressure in Jalen's chest tightened. He was the only student left whose parent hadn't shown up. Miss Pelton checked her clipboard. Okay, she said brightly, though a little warily. We've had such an amazing set of presentations today. One more student to go, Jalen? The class turned toward him. Jalen stood slowly, his legs feeling like rubber. His heart thudded so hard it nearly drowned out the whispering. He's really going through with it? He's gonna fake it again. Bet he'll say his dad's in space. He didn't respond. He couldn't. He stared at the door. Still closed. Still no one. Then a sharp giggle cut the silence. Kyle snorted. Guess NASA got lost on the way to school. Laughter followed, louder this time. Even Miss Pelton's smile faltered. Jalen's face flushed. His hands curled into fists. Just as he was about to sit down again. Defeated. Apologies for being late. A calm voice rang out from the doorway. Head swiveled. The room fell still. I'm Jalen's father. A tall man stepped into the classroom, casting a long shadow across the floor. His skin was a deep brown, smooth but with a few time-earned lines around the eyes. His build was lean, his presence magnetic. He wore a crisp white shirt beneath a NASA-branded navy jacket. Zipped halfway, clipped to his chest was an ID badge with the unmistakable NASA insignia and bold lettering beneath. Dr. Marcus Carter, lead systems engineer. Mars Initiative. Gasps rippled through the room. Miss Pelton blinked rapidly. Oh, Dr. Carter, please, come in. Jalen couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. His father gave him a small nod, a signal just for him, as he made his way to the front of the room. Setting a slim black case on the table. Without a wasted word, he began. I'm an aerospace systems engineer with NASA. He said, specifically, I'm leading one of the design teams for the Mars Initiative, our long-term mission to put human beings on the surface of Mars. He opened the case and took out a 3D printed scale model of a Mars lander. The model gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Intricate and unmistakably real. This is the Ares Pathfinder. It's still in development, but when we launch, likely in the 2030s, it'll carry the first human life support modules to the Martian surface. He pressed a button on a small projector device. A slideshow began on the screen behind him. Images of Mars terrain, satellite blueprints, and schematics overlaid with orbital math. The class was mesmerized. No way, someone whispered. Wait, this is real? This is, like, space stuff. Actual space stuff. Dr. Carter spoke with clarity and rhythm, adjusting his language for the 6th grade audience but never once dumbing it down. He explained how they simulated Mars gravity using parabolic flights. He showed a short video clip of a test rover moving through a red dust chamber. He passed around a titanium panel the size of a notebook, real spacecraft material, and let the kids feel how light but strong it was. Space engineering is about precision, he said. You don't get do-overs when your payload is 140 million miles away. Miss Pelton stood at the back of the room, arms folded, eyes wide. Even Kyle, who had called Jalen a liar more than once, was leaning forward. Slack-jawed, holding the spacecraft panel like it was a relic. Jalen sat motionless, hands in his lap, a warmth flooding his chest that he hadn't felt in months. Pride. Pure, undiluted pride. His dad continued, gesturing toward the projector. "This is my team," he said, showing a photo of about a dozen engineers. "Diverse in race, gender, and age. We come from different backgrounds. But we work together. Because getting to Mars? That's a human goal, not just a NASA one." Someone raised their hand. "How do you go to the bathroom in space?" Laughter. Dr. Carter grinned, very carefully. He replied, sparking even more laughter. He handled every question with patience and charm, from orbital velocity to whether you can make pancakes on Mars. You can't. The batter won't rise properly. When his presentation ended, the applause wasn't just loud, it was explosive. Jalen saw students he didn't even know clapping with both hands, eyes wide with wonder. Miss Pelton approached, her voice full of admiration. "That was the most incredible career day presentation I've ever seen." Dr. Carter nodded humbly. "Thank you. I appreciate that." She turned to Jalen. "You must be very proud of your father." Jalen nodded, finally finding his voice. "I am." And for the first time, no one laughed, no one scoffed, no one doubted. On the contrary, kids started gathering around him. "Dude, that was amazing. Why didn't you say your dad builds rockets?" "He doesn't build them," Jalen corrected gently. "He designs them." Even cooler. Later, as the parents filtered out and class resumed, whispers of awe lingered in the air. Miss Pelton called for attention. "All right, everyone, let's settle down, though I think we've all just learned something really special about what's possible." She smiled at Jalen. He smiled back. That evening, as he walked to the car with his dad, Jalen asked quietly, "Did you hear what they said? Before you came in?" His father nodded. "I did. They didn't believe me. I know. But, now they do." Dr. Carter opened the car door. "Let them be surprised," he said. "It means they weren't ready for you. But that doesn't mean you weren't ready for them." Jalen climbed in. He stared out the window as the school disappeared behind them, replaced by sky, open and wide and full of light. He whispered, mostly to himself, "They'll never laugh at me again." His dad didn't reply. He just reached over and squeezed Jalen's shoulder once. That said more than words ever could. After the final bell rang and most of the parents had left, a handful of students and teachers stayed behind in room 6B. Still buzzing from the morning's event, Miss Pelton, usually quick to tidy and usher kids along, surprised everyone when she asked Dr. Carter, "Would you mind staying a bit longer? I think the class still has some questions, and maybe some things to learn." Jalen's father smiled, setting his NASA badge down on the desk. "I'd be honored." He turned to the class. "I shared what I do. But maybe it's time I told you who I am." The kids fell silent again. Something in his voice had shifted, warmer, more personal. "I didn't grow up around rockets," he began. "I grew up in Southside Chicago. If any of you know what that means, you know it's not a place where kids are expected to become NASA engineers." Jalen, seated at his desk, sat up straighter. "Where I lived," Dr. Carter continued, "there were sirens at night. People I knew dropped out. Some joined gangs. Some disappeared. But my mother, Jalen's grandmother, she told me something when I was 7 that I never forgot. Don't let where you start decide where you finish." He paused, letting that settle. "I loved space, not because I saw it often, but because I couldn't see it at all. Looking up at the night sky made me feel like I was part of something bigger. Something endless. I wanted to know why the stars twinkled, why planets moved, and how humans could ever hope to leave Earth." He walked slowly across the room, stopping near the Mars lander model. "But when I told people that dream, they laughed." His eyes scanned the class, catching a few guilty glances. "They laughed when I said I wanted to be an engineer. When I applied to the top universities, they said, 'People like you don't get in there.' When I finally got into MIT, on full scholarship, someone in my freshman dorm asked me if I was the janitor's son." Gasps echoed around the classroom. Even Miss Pelton looked shaken. "But I didn't argue," he said calmly. "I just solved the problems they couldn't. I wrote code they couldn't debug. I stayed up when others gave up. Eventually, the same people who doubted me were asking me for help. He stepped closer to the board, writing 2 words in big letters. Perception. Reality. They perceived me as less. He said, tapping the first word. But the reality? He tapped the second. I had already built myself into more. A hush fell over the room. Even the fidgety students were now stone still. He turned back to them. What I want you to understand, especially you, Jalen, is that people will always assume things. Because of where you're from, how you speak, how you look, but their assumptions are not your truth. Your truth is what you do. Jalen's throat tightened. He felt the sting behind his eyes but blinked it away. Then something unexpected happened. Kyle, the very kid who had mocked him the most, raised his hand slowly. Mr. Carter, I didn't know any of that. I'm sorry for what I said to Jalen. A few other heads nodded. Miss Pelton stepped forward, her voice soft. Jalen, I owe you an apology as well. I should have listened, really listened. You told the truth, and I didn't stand up for you. Jalen looked down, unsure what to say, but his dad gave him a nod. The same quiet signal from earlier. You don't have to carry their doubt anymore. Then Miss Pelton brightened. You know, earlier this month, Jalen brought in a model he made at home. A paper rocket, fully labeled and scaled. I think it's time we took another look. Jalen blinked. You still have it? I do. I kept it in the cupboard. Would you mind showing it to us now? With trembling hands, Jalen walked to the side of the room. Miss Pelton carefully retrieved a long cardboard box. Inside was the paper model Jalen had spent a week crafting, based on real spacecraft blueprints he'd studied online. He placed it gently on the table beside his father's lander. It wasn't as polished, of course. Made of construction paper and tape, with hand-drawn decals and foil-wrapped cylinders. But the care and precision were obvious. Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. You built this yourself? Jalen nodded. I followed some schematics. Then I just adjusted a few things. His father crouched, inspecting the base. You used a dual-stage launch system, he said, impressed. And your fins aren't just for show, they're angled for stabilization. Some of the kids craned their necks to see better. This is advanced, his father said aloud. I've seen interns who don't think through this level of detail. Jalen's cheeks burned, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from something that felt brand new, respect. Miss Pelton asked, would you be willing to present it to the class? Jalen? He looked at her, startled, then at the room. They weren't laughing, they were listening. Jalen swallowed hard, took a breath, and nodded. This rocket is based on the Artemis I configuration. He began, voice shaking slightly. It's got 2 solid rocket boosters and a liquid-fueled core stage. I couldn't build the engine bay properly, so I modified the tail fins to simulate thrust direction. One by one, hands went up. How did you learn this stuff? What's Artemis I? Can you build another one? Jalen found himself answering confidently, with his father adding in the occasional technical term or fun fact. Together, father and son turned that classroom into a tiny space center. By the time they finished, the school principal had even wandered in, pulled by the whispers of something extraordinary happening in room 6B. As the class dispersed for lunch, kids swarmed Jalen, not with insults, but with admiration. You're like a real scientist. Dude, can I come over and help build the next one? You're gonna work at NASA someday, right? Jalen shrugged, a smile teasing the corners of his lips. Maybe, or somewhere farther. Miss Pelton stopped them just before they left. I'd like to add your paper rocket to our school's showcase. Jalen, she said, right next to the science achievement display in the main hallway. Jalen looked to his dad, unsure. Dr. Carter smiled. It's your work, let them see it. So Jalen nodded. Okay. And as they walked out of the room together, father and son, side by side, the hallway that once felt like a minefield now felt like a launch pad. That Friday afternoon, the energy at Langston Elementary was different. The halls, once echoing with subtle ridicule and whispers behind backs, now buzzed with something else entirely: curiosity, admiration, and, for the first time, respect. Jalen wasn't sure when the shift began. Maybe it was during his presentation. Maybe it was the way his father's story cracked something open inside those listening. Or maybe it was the simple truth that reality had finally shattered the perception. By Monday morning, it was undeniable. The boy once called a liar was now being called something else. "Hey Jalen," one girl whispered during science class. "What books do you read to learn that stuff? Can I help with your next rocket?" a boy asked, tapping him gently on the shoulder. Even Kyle, the kid who had once taped a crude drawing of a rocket with "NASA liar" on his locker, walked up slowly during recess. Shuffling awkwardly. "Hey, I was thinking," Kyle mumbled, not quite meeting Jalen's eyes, "that maybe I was wrong. And maybe I was kind of a jerk. So, I'm sorry." Jalen blinked. He didn't say anything right away. Not because he didn't know how, but because for the first time in weeks, his heart didn't feel heavy. He simply nodded. "It's okay," he said quietly. Kyle hesitated, then reached into his backpack. "Also, I made this." He pulled out a piece of folded cardboard and unwrapped it. Inside was a clumsy but earnest-looking paper rocket. "I followed some online instructions," he added, "but I don't really get the thrust part. Could you show me?" Jalen smiled. "A real one." "Sure." It was a small moment. A quiet gesture. But it felt huge, like a door had opened. And Jalen walked through it. Blank. That afternoon, the science lab that used to echo with indifference was now full of chatter and eager voices. Miss Pelton stood back, arms crossed and smiling, as Jalen led a small group of classmates through building paper rockets with recycled bottles, straws, and string. Some were better than others. One even exploded mid-glue, but no one laughed anymore. Only cheered. "Keep the fins straight or the flight path'll twist," Jalen advised, pointing to a crooked model. One girl looked up at him in awe. "How do you know all this stuff?" He shrugged, a little bashful. "I just read a lot. And I try stuff. Sometimes it fails, but I fix it." At the edge of the classroom, Jalen's mother watched from the doorway, holding her phone up to take a photo. Her eyes shimmered, and behind her stood Dr. Carter, arms folded, beaming. Blank. Later that evening, the golden sunset spread soft light across the neighborhood as Jalen and his father walked home together. They strolled down cracked sidewalks through rows of aging apartments. The hum of traffic was distant, muffled beneath birdsong and the occasional laugh from a passing porch. "You were great today," Dr. Carter said, glancing at his son. Jalen kept his hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes on the ground. "You too." A beat of silence passed between them. "Can I tell you something?" Jalen asked quietly. "Anything. I was scared you wouldn't come." His father slowed, then gently placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "I know. I wish I could have answered your email sooner. I was in a black zone, couldn't get a signal out for hours." Jalen nodded. "I wasn't mad," he added, "just embarrassed." Dr. Carter sighed. "You had every right to feel that way." Jalen looked up at him. "Why do people assume we're lying? Just because we're like this?" "Because people fear what they don't understand," his father replied. "And sometimes, they're taught, without even realizing, that people who look like us don't belong in certain places." They walked a few more paces in silence. "But that doesn't make them right," Dr. Carter said, "and it doesn't mean you shrink to fit their ignorance." Jalen kicked a small stone ahead of them. "Did they laugh at you, too, when you were little?" "Oh yeah," his father chuckled dryly. "All the time. Some even laughed at me when I started at NASA. They thought I got in because they needed to fill a diversity quota." He paused, looking out toward the horizon where the moon had begun to rise faintly. "But I didn't prove them wrong to get even. I proved them wrong because I believed in me." Jalen let that sink in. "You know," his father continued, "I watched you in that classroom today. The way you explained those rockets, helped others, kept your cool. That's not just intelligence. That's leadership." Jalen blinked. "Leadership? Absolutely." They reached the corner of their block where the small community park sat quiet beneath swaying trees. They paused at a bench. "Want to sit for a bit?" Dr. Carter asked. Jalen nodded, and they both dropped onto the cool wooden bench. For a while, they just watched the sky turn darker, stars beginning to prick the veil above them. "Do you still want to work in space?" his father asked. Jalen nodded. "Yeah, more than ever." "Then you will." Jalen turned toward him, unsure. "What if I'm not smart enough?" "You are. What if I mess up?" "Then you learn." Jalen looked down at his hands. "What if I stop believing I can do it?" His father leaned in gently. "Then remember this day," he said, voice firm but warm. Remember that no one in that room believed in you, until the moment they saw you. But you believed in yourself before anyone else did. He tapped Jalen's chest softly. That fire in you? That dream? It's real, and you don't need permission to chase it. He stood and offered his hand. Don't ever let someone else's doubt extinguish your light. Son. Jalen looked up, took his father's hand, and stood tall beside him. They continued walking, quiet but connected. The streetlights flickered on above them. At their apartment door, before stepping inside, Jalen paused. He looked up. The stars were out in full now, glittering across the black velvet sky. The moon hung heavy and serene. He raised his eyes higher still, beyond the lights, beyond the shadows, beyond what anyone could point to. Somewhere out there, he knew, was the red dust of Mars, the icy moons of Jupiter, the darkness between galaxies. And he made himself a promise: one day, they'll know my name up there, too. He smiled softly, his voice barely a whisper. I'll build something they can't ignore. And with that, Jalen stepped inside, ready for whatever came next. The boy who once sat alone, shamed and doubted, now walked with a light no laughter could smother. A new future had begun, fueled by one sentence no one would ever laugh at again. My dad works at NASA. _blank. The end. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us, no dream is too big. And no voice is too small. Until next time, keep believing.